I will call to order the Finance, Buildings, and Grounds Committee meeting, which was duly noticed on October 17, 2025, through posting and notification of the press in accordance with Wisconsin statutes 19.84. So with that being said, we called it to it. Oh, and I'm supposed to give a safety message too now. This is a curve, but those are pretty easy to do. And that, I always just fall back on what I feel of people on how they drive. People don't come to full stops at stop signs, and they scare the heck out of me, because then I'm afraid to go across the intersection on a four-way stop. I see an awful lot of people going right to turn left, going left to turn right, occupy a lane and a half, and that, and many other things. Can anyone add anything to that?
Just the inattentiveness of. Just the inattentiveness in general. There's far too many people, and they're not in any one age group. They're all ages, definitely, who are continuously texting, on the phone, texting, whatever have you. And it's just like they're just unaware that anyone else exists, that anyone else is important. It's a real, it goes much deeper than what people normally say. When we have a whole society that honestly doesn't recognize that even other people exist, even other people that look like themselves exist, we have serious, serious issues. So this is not even a safety message. It's a red alert, danger, danger, danger. This society is in danger. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was well received by me. Adopt the agenda for the, it went off again. We need thank you. We need a motion to adopt the October 21st, 2025 Finance, Building, and Ground Committee. And that, so do I have a motion?
Agenda? So moved.
One?
Second.
We got a second. The lovely ladies did that for us. Okay, then, the first thing on the agenda is our favorite MC, Dan McCray, and he's going to, on the district open enrollment, out survey.
That's correct. So open enrollment is a significant component of our budget and the services and programs we offer our students here in the school district of Janesville. We have students who leave the district for a varied number of reasons and students who come to our district for a varied number of reasons. I'm old enough that I can refer to some research that was done nearly 2 decades ago out of UW-Whitewater by Dr. Bambi Stats and Dr. Mark Skidmore in terms of open enrollment. And they really came to, if you will, two major contributions for open enrollment. One is higher spending districts attract students because the perception is there's more programming to offer students at those districts. The second is folks essentially move districts because of perhaps some demographic issues, socioeconomic and what have you. So, but that's nearly 20 years. So let's fast forward to where we've been during my tenure here. Is when I first arrived in 1920, we were significantly positive in terms of the net open enrollment into the district. It was a revenue item.
You said 1920.
Did I say 1920? Yeah, thank you. So when I first came to the district in 2019-20 school year, not 1920, so a little bit of play. I'm not that old, but I did reference my age, I suppose, earlier in the meeting. But nonetheless, we were positive. And we've actually seen a flip to where we have an expenditures that far exceed revenues. And so We know that administratively. You're going to see it in tonight's presentation. You're going to see it next Tuesday when we talk about the overall budget adoption and levy certification. So knowing that's on the horizon, administratively, the decision was, let's engage a group such as School Perceptions to do a survey of those parents who choose to open enroll out. So you're going to see Darren Sievers present on that information in just a few moments. And what I want to forecast is a little bit more of a January presentation as well, because we have curiosities. Some of those curiosities, if you will, rose to the top based upon the work that School Perceptions, Darren and his partner, if you will, who actually conducted the survey, Bev, undertook and were able to identify for us. So I'm going to leave the findings to the person who best knows the findings, but just a couple thoughts in terms of open enrollment. Real quick, open enrollment is a revenue when they come into the district, and it is an expenditure when open enrolled students leave. And just to perhaps also, and you're kind of getting a few slides here, and I inadvertently missed one, think of open enrollment, in or out, as public school students attending another public school. This has nothing to do with homeschooling. This has nothing to do with private schools. It's solely public school to public school transfers in and out. And then as you see in the first graph there, it's a net gain or loss. So as an example, if we have 50 students coming in and we have 40 students going out, we have a net positive gain, right, of 10 students. That is additional revenue to the district. Ins are revenue, outs are expenditures. It's the same dollar value. This has been our trend since 2014-15. Right, so you see we had a net gain at the end of the year, right? So that's another thing we want to keep in mind is when we look at the data, we have the start of the year and we have what's called alternative open enrollment. And students, even if they are traditionally enrolled, right, are rather fluid. Students move, students leave, right? So there's lots of reasons. It's not a static dollar or a static number. So what you see are all the year-end reconciliations. What you see come 25-26 is the September count, if you will, the launch date or the lock-in date of revenues and expenditures. So far, and we've seen a positive move for us, right? So we went from a -74 last year to a -7, which is then weird to say we have a net gain of 67. Right? But that's good because I think our fear was, right, administratively we understand, well, we're -42, we're -74. If that number were worse than last year's number, you all are going to be looking at us saying, so what's up with that? Right, so again, we're looking onto the horizon and we understand that there's concern. All right, real quick, if we look at the change in counts over 2020 to 2025, and when I'm using 2020, that's fiscal year end 2019-20 compared to fiscal year end 2024-25. Right, so sometimes we get a little lost in terms of what years we're talking about. So if you look at the highlight, and we're not going to go every district, that's a January issue, as you can see the switch in Milton. The 2020 count out was low and the 25 count in was high. I think there's actually we're looking at the outs, then we're looking at the ins, my apologies, right? But you can see the orange bar to the left, right, and the orange bar to the right. So it's different than what it was. We are losing more students to Milton than we were 5 years ago. Net gain. If we look at kind of our top districts, we have a number of districts, over 24 districts that we participate in terms of open enrollment in. So I look at those that are close to us. We can see when we compare, right, the position is we have gained in Beloit, we have gained slightly in Turner, we have gained in Clinton, we have lost to Edgerton, we have slightly gained to Evansville, we have seen that switch that we alluded to earlier relative to Milton, and then we have lost a little bit compared to the prior year period that we are measuring to Parkview. I think we're going to go into a lot more detail come January. I'm sure everyone's waiting with bated breath. So highlighting just a few, Edgerton, we had a net gain of 3, now we have a net loss of 33. If we look at McFarland, now McFarland is very interesting. These are not students who are driving to McFarland. McFarland offers a virtual academy. We offer a virtual school, right? And the structures of virtual schools, and Superintendent Holtzman, if he so chooses, can kind of chime in, vary from district to district. Right? We, I believe, here in Janesville have a reputation for a very rigorous online program. I can't speak to the other online programs that are available for students to open enroll in. And then we look at Milton, we were positive 163, and now we're negative 15. So why is that? Well, that's why we engaged School Perceptions to help us better understand, perhaps pose some questions to us based upon the data that we, over the coming months, will take a little bit of a deeper dive into. This is, again, just kind of taking a look, a little bit more than 3 key observations, but really focusing in on Edgerton, McFarland, and Milton. So some, again, working draft, and you'll see some information here once Darren takes the podium. Like we've engaged School Perceptions, that's completed. We know we are engaging MD Roffers to again do a community growth and enrollment survey. That work will begin in November, and we'll have a report come March. Open enrollment by building, this is some of our deep research that we need to kind of take a bit of a deeper dive into, and we haven't, but how many open enroll students are actually going to Parker High School because of Parker Arts Academy? Right, where are our open enrollment students going? And is it because of our programming, or what is it exactly? And you'll hear some stories again from Mr. Sievers when he presents. I'm a big fan of mapping. Right, so when I was in Clinton as the school business official, I was curious, are we losing students because they're on the perimeter, or are we losing students because they're village center? Right, because perimeter is perhaps more explainable because they actually may be closer to another school. Or did they just build a house across the street? This is sometimes how the country rocks, and that is now in Clinton School District, but they've always been attending Beloit Turner or Milton. Right, so mapping is kind of interesting and creates a very nice visual. And then I think always, right, you'll hear this theme from Superintendent Holtzman, you'll hear it from others, is we need to continue to tell the story of the great things we offer here at the School District of Janesville. So those are kind of some in process as well as things that are on the horizon in terms of action steps. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Sievers, but I do want to give a quick shout out. You'll hear me say this a couple times, is Dean Hartley does a great job. She is our open enrollment coordinator here in the School District of Janesville. She's actually retiring at the end of the year. I believe that's common knowledge, or I just, timed her out. And she does exceptional work. And then so too does Rachel Monson, who actually coordinates our Third Friday count, right? So those are 2 great data sources we have here in this building. Enough for me. I'm going to turn it over to Darren.
Great. Good afternoon. Yeah, my name is Darren Sievers. I'm in my 4th year with School Perceptions, working for that team. Prior to that, I worked for the Slinger School District for 27 years. Variety of roles, but the last 9 as superintendent. And we did a lot of work with School Perceptions, and that led to me being offered an opportunity. They really were looking for a superintendent voice on their team. And so I've been working with them for 4 years, serving largely Minnesota, Western Wisconsin, but whatever project kind of fits my background. Pleasure to be here. This was a particularly exciting report for me to work on because my master's thesis back in '01, when the district approached me about pursuing a principal position in the district, I wrote my master's thesis on open enrollment because it was a big deal in Slinger too. It's a big deal for every district because of the numbers that Dan just outlined. And so I've given a lot of thought to this. When Dan approached us about this very survey about 3 years ago, and we didn't have the capacity to do it because we're just knee deep in community surveys. But we've grown, we've added staff, and actually my former executive assistant, who is our registrar and handled open enrollment for Slinger, joined the School Perceptions team, actually gathered all this data for you. Her name is Bev Zakowski, and she does a great job. And they've started to talk to me again in Slinger after we poached her away from the district, but that's a whole nother conversation. But anyway, so here's our flow of the presentation. I'm going to give you a brief background about the company, what we do, how we do it, and then we're going to dive right into who took the survey and what we learned. So we've been in existence for 23 years, founded in 2002. We've done 3 million staff, parent, student, and community surveys, all trying to help school districts improve in all 50 states and 5 foreign countries. And we've helped over 1,000 districts with strategic planning, referendum planning, much like the operational referendum that we helped Janesville with a couple of years ago. So let's get into your results here. So we got a list from the district of all the open enrollment out families. And we reached out to them over the summer via phone and email. We pestered them as much as we could without being such a pain that it would look poorly for the district. And we got 83 respondents for a participation rate of 18%. So automatically, I'm sure you're wondering, is that good? Is that bad? Ironically, that's exactly our company average on our community surveys. So when we do an operational referendum survey or a capital referendum survey, we're looking to remodel some buildings, historically across 23 years, 18% is our average. So very acceptable and understandable because it's hard to get people to respond. It's also very reliable. Our accuracy with our surveys is, and predictability when it comes to referendums is 94%, meaning if we say a project will pass, 94% of the time we'll be right. And if we say you don't have the votes to put this on the ballot, we've been right 94% of the time. I learned this firsthand in Slinger because I was a customer before I was an employee, and Bill Foster, the owner of the company, the inventor of the company, told me, he said, as you track results, once it hits 10%, your data will not change much. All yeses and nos and maybes are all going to be about the same all the way to the finish line. And that was exactly true on our project that ended up passing in Slinger. So 18% will give you a perspective on how your families that are open enrolling out feel about the district. So respondent information, one of the beauties of our software and the data that's in our server is we can disaggregate your data a number of ways. Any question we ask, we can study those responses specifically. For example, one of the first questions we asked is, did your children ever attend the school district of Janesville? Which is a very clear distinction from those that never brought their kids here in the first place. So we can study the yeses that they have and then they left, and we can study the no's, no, we've never attended Janesville at all, okay? Other ways we can drill down, we ask the question, when did you first initiate open enrollment? And we can look at just that group, the biggest group, the 18%, 2021, and look at how their answers are different from maybe the answers in 2018, if you wanted to. Again, we could lose hours studying your data. I'm going to try to give you a simple overview. By the way, this is a very new product for us, something new we've been doing. You're only the third district to use this tool, and your results are drastically different from the two other, one Wisconsin district, one Minnesota district, and your results are drastically different than the other two. And we won't name them, but I will talk about them a bit just to contrast what we learned about you as opposed to them. We can also drill down your data by what the answers they gave us based on what grade their child is in. When we do our staff surveys, our student surveys, drilling down on some of the exciting work we're able to do, because we can search out groups and see how the answers differ or align based on these different factors. And then where is your child attending school now? And we can study that by each of those different subgroups as well. And as you see, the largest group is attending a neighboring school district, and that supports the data that Dan just presented as well, where he identified what neighboring districts. So one of the questions we asked is, would you ever consider moving your child back to the district? And that's how we're going to break out the data for this presentation is they might consider coming back, and no, I would never consider coming back, because we wanted to understand with that mindset how they answered the question about why they left in the first place. So that's a pie chart showing the percent of those respondents who said yes or no and don't know. And then the following slides are what I think you as board members will find most interesting, is what were the main reasons that they chose to open enroll your child out of the district. I think that's the most powerful data point that we're able to provide for you in this report. And when making decisions about your child's education, what is most important to you? So two things, learn why they left in the first place, and secondly, what's most important to families like this, so that if there's anything you can do within the district systems to address this, so maybe it curbs the outflow of open enrollment outs for the future, That's really what that second question was designed to do. What open enrollment parents, what's most important to them? So here are your results. There's 3 slides. What were the reasons that they chose to open enroll out? And again, we broke this out by the dark green, those that said they would consider coming back, and the lighter sage green that said they would not. And so as you can see, as we go through the list, the current school is closer to their home or their work. Big reason. Convenience. We're a mobile society, professional people trying to keep up with the pace of life, get their kids to soccer, piano lessons, all the different things that go into just being a parent nowadays. And that was one of the biggest reasons for these families is closer to their home or their work. The other big reason is maybe they work for another school district. And so they're just bringing their kids to the system they attend. Same calendar, same in-service days, all those things that have to be accounted for as you're managing 2-income families. It takes basically 2 incomes to raise a family these days, and so professional people chasing around need the convenience. Another factor, and we are doing a number of surveys right now for rural districts in Wisconsin that need childcare or are struggling to pay for childcare. Proximity to childcare is a big factor. Drop the children off and then zip over to their workplace and pick them up at the end of their workday. Friends attending other districts, so social reasons, busing and transportation convenience. Low on the list, and this is where I would talk to you about the next 2, not as prominent as some of the other 2 reports we've done this past year, are peer group concerns and bullying and discipline concerns. In each of those cases, those were far and away the number 1 reasons. It was really about safety and social amongst the other kids in the system. And quite honestly, we went into this not knowing what we'd learned about Janesville, but I was thrilled to see that that was not the reason, because those are not easy. Those are climate issues, and those are not easy issues to fix once you kind of get pegged for having unruly schools and kids out of control. These other districts were in the high 50s and 60% as that being the reason why these families are open enrolling out. Then as we go through the rest of the list, it's a variety of things, not any one big thing. This more and actually kind of mirrors my 24-year-old master's thesis. It was, for Slinger, it was a variety of reasons about why they're leaving and a variety of reasons why they're coming in. And that's how Janesville report seems to be talking to us as well. Class sizes, facilities, special education, and then finally, athletics, course offerings, etc. So before I move on to that secondary question, any questions from the board about these data points? I'll go back, particularly back to these more prominent reasons.
Darren, if I may, and the committee, if I may, just to focus a little bit on the peer group concerns and the bullying discipline, right? And just so we're crystal clear in terms of the yes group and the no group, right? And then when you and I were conversing, and I think as you presented information to the director team as well, is, right, there's also a perception if we were doing a traditional student survey, right? Like these numbers are perhaps not dramatically different. There's always, right? So if you could just touch on that, please.
Yes. So when we talk about a traditional student survey, the fact we ask the question, what factors distract you from your learning? What are the biggest things that cause you anxiety? What makes learning hard for you? That's one of the questions our school districts are looking for from us when we interview or send an email survey to our student bodies. And almost always the number 1 reason is distracting behaviors of other students. So even though they're kids and they're accepting of other kids, when really given the privacy of an anonymous school perception survey and telling us what makes learning hard for them, they'll say, the other kids having to be disciplined all of the time by my teacher because I can't get the help I need, or I lose concentration because they're talking the whole time and nobody will hold them accountable for their behavior. And we'll see data points like 63% of kids will say that that's the reason that learning is hard for them. So again, when you contrast that with the data that we're gathering for Janesville here, it shows that, certainly that's a reason amongst these open enrollment parents, but it's not the reason. And at the end, I'm gonna summarize those yeses and nos and give you a totality of your results, so you can see that it's a consideration, but it falls well below the threshold where we're talking to other districts about behaviors being a concern. And that's particularly hard for a system as big as you. Bigger you are, the harder it is to have everything aligned with your disciplinary policies, practices, and have teachers carrying it out in a consistent manner, which is a question we ask on our staff survey. And typically the lowest scoring question on our staff survey is disciplinary practices being, the policies being clear and the practices being consistent from room to room to room. They get frustrated because Susie doesn't ever send anyone to the office and her class is turned upside down, and I'm just trying to teach my class right next door. Okay, teachers want their peers to hold kids accountable for their behavior as well. Okay, is that what you're?
Yes.
Yeah, you bet. Then we ask that second question, when making decisions about your child's education, what factors are most important? And this is more from the standpoint of, just what are they looking for from their school system, whether they consider coming back, what they were seeking in the district. They're not going to just go to another district just because it's convenient. They need certain things from that system too. And so this just gives you maybe more of a long-range thinking about, this is what open enrollment parents value the most: competent, caring staff. They want their kids to have healthy friendships. Discipline, safety, and bullying are very important to them. But then you see proximity to work and home. They want academic rigor. They want reasonable class sizes. And then this list shrinks from their programs, whether it's sports, whether it's technical programs, being proficient in technology in the classroom, offerings, math and science, offerings of foreign language, special education, etc. And I don't think any member of your admin team would be surprised by what is important to these open enrollment families. Again, I'll go back to the most prominent. We see that all the time we have a parent survey tool, independent of open enrollment, just what do you value the most? And they want a competent and caring staff. They want their kids to be cared for when they drop them off, an extension of the care they receive at home. So our summary, and we always try to summarize because that's a lot of data and a lot of bar graphs. So let's just talk about the 5. And this is both groups. Would they consider coming back, or would they not consider? This is a combination of all the responses we got. Top 5 reasons now, percolating to the top was bullying, discipline, and safety. But again, only 33% of the respondents said that was their concern. That was a concern on their radar. And again, these other districts that I've done this same report for are 59 and 63%. So almost half for Janesville compared to these other community-wide reports. And districts similar size. Community perception about the performance of the district, teaching methods, student achievement, peer group concerns. These are very, very low percents across all 5 of the most prominent reasons. Okay? But we rank them nonetheless just to give you kind of a summary and takeaway. Bottom 5 are these. These are the least of your worries. Programs, 4K options, and lack of before and after school daycare. And I would tell you, there are districts right now, as I said, we're doing surveys because they are underwater financially because the neighboring district is getting all the open enrollment ins because it's simply daycare, nothing else. Just they have a place to drop their kids off and pick them up and learn all in the same building, door-to-door care. And then out of those 89 responses, these are all the comments that they gave at the end. Every one of our surveys we say, is there anything else you'd like to share that wasn't part of the interview or the virtual survey link? And I'll just give you some wait time here and let you read what these parents said. So, you see it's child-centered, and some of it's child-decided, honestly, when you read those comments. I mean, this is driven by the children, a friendship, or what the child wants. But, so the good news, we appreciate that Dan wanted to dig into this and learn on behalf of the district what could be done. Love seeing that your data is moving the other direction, because that's a game changer financially. Trust me, I was waiting on bated breath every year to see where Slinger would be with the open enrollment in and outs, because it's such a dramatic swing. But the good news is that we didn't really unearth anything that is of significant concern. They're common concerns, but they're also common concerns at a much lower frequency than many of the districts we serve, because even though we kind of have the reputation as being the referendum company, it's only 40% of our business. The fastest growing area of our company is our staff, parent, and student surveys, where we check in with staff, student, and parents on things, and we hear all the time about what's most important to parents within their district, and your data supports that you've got great things taking place here. You just, given compared to some of the other districts, they're just more convenient than your district and where the school that those children attend is located. Okay. Any questions from this group?
The report looks positive overall, of that. Thank you very much, sir. No, it looks very positive, and I wasn't sure what to expect and that, but I like that. And of course, we get down to the point where to improve things, there isn't much to improve. And that, it doesn't mean we shouldn't look for it and try to find it, but it's pretty tough to find the needle in the haystack.
Yeah.
And that, so I thank you very much for
Yeah.
what you've done. Sure there's no questions? Oh, good.
Much different challenge if you find that it's all behavior, sweeping behavioral change across all your sites, much different challenge than a report like this, where it's a few things, but nothing widespread.
Well, we thank you very much.
Yeah, you can't change where you're
Very nice.
located, right? So,
I'm sure we'll see you again.
yeah, well, I'll be back in a week.
Okay.
So,
I think real quick, if I may, and I want to be very conscientious of our time together, is kudos to Superintendent Holtzman and others in terms of, we actually did a direct mail piece relative to RUHS, Rock University High School, to surrounding communities to attract students to that program. And that's what I referenced earlier in terms of digging into the data a little bit more. Infinite Campus is our student management software. We can identify an open enrolled student, and we can begin to measure a little bit more in terms of the effectiveness of that open enrollment piece, as well as to Arise Virtual Academy. If you go back to the comments, you'll notice the fifth comment down, and I say this in part because in 2 districts that I've been in, I've seen a comment similar. In a prior district, as we were looking at open enrolled students, we did, if you will, rather informal survey. And I remember my superintendent at that time called a parent and said, "What would bring you back?" And the response was, "How much are you going to give me?" Right? Because there are at times a stipend that accompanies an open enrollment, because that stipend can be then allocated for use for things such as field trips and other school supplies. That a district, if you were attending here physically, we would naturally provide, right? So there is a dividend, if you will, that some open enrolled virtual schools do provide. That is not an element that we provide for our students who attend Arise Virtual Academy.
Thank you. Moving on, I gotta get used to this. Update on long-range facility planning. Jeremy Hackbart, Mike Johnson, Tori Schultz, and our usual MC.
Yeah, I'm
Dan
gonna sit
Craig.
for a minute. Usually I take the podium, but again, we're trying to keep the meeting moving along. As you referenced in the agenda, is we're gonna have a presentation from both Mike Johnson, representing Cullen, as well as Tori Schultz and Jeremy Hackbar from EUA. It seems like an eternity ago, but it was really only a short 11 months ago that the community supported our capital referendum to the tune of 63%. And we're very grateful for that community support and investment, which is just under 17% of our overall identified need. A lot of the work that we are undertaking is very technical in nature, right? So it's been a year. What have we been doing? You'll hear some highlights presented by Mr. Leader and Julie Yerke in terms of what we've been doing, but a lot of the work, as you know, will commence in June of 2026. So we're asking Jeremy and Tori to talk about the technical aspects of the design and engineering, and Mike Johnson in terms of what does their interaction with architects such as EUA, what does that look like, and how are construction documents moving from schematic to actual bid documents. And Mike Johnson's going to talk about the bid process that we are just about to embark upon with phase 1A of the not operating referendum, sorry, of our capital referendum.
Thank you.
It's the PDFs.
The other one.
So, yeah, I don't, I'm gonna have to just kind of scroll through, I think. Yeah, I think I can get it, there's not one, I tried it earlier. So I can do it later. So I'm just have to scroll through.
Do you have the other,
Do you
That
have the
one's
other,
mine.
this
You have
one's,
the-
that one's Mike's.
Oh,
Need the other PDF.
or do we have to go in order? Which is fine too.
are they all together again?
They're two separate. Do you want to go first?
I only saw one.
Does it matter?
Doesn't really
Didn't
matter,
matter.
no, I suppose.
No?
Mike can go.
No. I get a little shock and awe campaign. There will not be a test later, just visual. We are in a school district learning environment, so visual aids can help a little bit. So that's all that is. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mike Johnson with JP Cullen. Looking back at my history, our last referendum update, I think, was in April. So some of these slides are maybe a little familiar, and I get a clicker, right? Oh, this because it's not PowerPoint? Yep.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. We are technology, we can do it. Except my eyes visually. Is this the full screen button?
See the screen right there to your right, Mike?
Okay, yeah, that one?
In front of you.
In front of me.
Right.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dan. I think we'll go this way. All right. So just an update on the team. The past members, or not past members, but the top row was in our last presentation, Scott Llewellyn and Matthew Steplik. As we transition into construction, there will be the project team, the project manager, and superintendent. And the second row, Jessica through Eli, have helped me in the last few months here with the budgeting, estimating, design, quantity takeoff, and the kind of meat and potatoes of what we do in the pre-construction environment with Cullen. So I just wanted to give them a little credit because they've really helped support me to get to where we are today. And again, this is a familiar slide. This I really was gonna maybe speed through, but it almost acts as my agenda. So this may be hard to read, but on the left here, we talk about successful referendum as this vertical line. Schematic, design, construction, I think the EUA team will talk more about that. I'm gonna focus on these vertical lines in between. Updated cost estimate, and then construction bidding. So filling the gaps of what happens in between the design and documentation phases. So if you remember from this even goes back to pre-referendum conversations, we talked about scorecards, right? Evaluating the facility, converting the scorecard assessment information into estimated construction budgets, right? So this is just one snip to kind of refresh your memory. And all the data through some prioritization meetings resulted in a November referendum. Again, hard to read. 151.8 million is what went on the ballot, is what was supported by the community. For me, in the pre-construction world within Cullen, right, this is my baseline. When we start going into competitive bidding and construction documents, right, we're always comparing back to the baseline budget and where we're at. So it's a critical milestone for the process of establishing that baseline and continuing to track on that moving forward. So schematic design, going back to the visual aid, the smaller pile of papers over there, when EUA's team develops documents in the schematic design phase, we were delivered with a binder called project manual or specifications and a handful of drawings. And I should preface, the conversations today are revolved around the phase 1A, which is the district office at the ESC, Wilson, and Jefferson. Right, so that little pile of documents is just those three schools only, right? It is a rinse and repeat process as we work through the 19 facilities in the district. So our schematic design budgeting, this is the schematic design phase from the budget is really our first leap from conceptual costs of a really high level, 151 million, to a more detailed budget. We still use historical cost data, unit costs, online resources, and we also start to convert our general conditions, and what that means to us is the manpower, temporary toilets, job trailers, the stuff that you see at a construction site to like run and manage the work. General conditions are those types of things, not the bricks and mortar and the paint and things like that. So we will start to evolve our general conditions from, initially it's just a percentage of construction, and then at this initial design, schematic design level, we start to think about, well, we need a full-time project manager, a site engineer, the job we think is gonna take 12 months or 15 months, right? So we start to piece that together at a preliminary level. And a couple other conditions for schematic design, we're still not competitively bidding, right? We're not partnering with subcontractors. This is all historical, conceptual information, right? Cullen's been at this for 125 years, so we leverage that historical information. And then contingency, I would love to tell you I do everything perfectly and never make a mistake, but that's what contingency's for. At the schematic design level, we range it, depends on the project, the client, things like that. Typical industry standards, 12 to 15% at the schematic design level. And this, again, not intended to be part of a test, but it's a tool that we use. When I talk about 125 years of industry experience, I can cheat a little bit. This is a report that we used, happens to be from Orfordville Parkview School Districts. The project was built in 2015. We have spreadsheets and technology through the ENR Engineering News Record that allows us to take old data and bring it up and escalate it to current costs. But from a project scope standpoint, for Parkview in 2015, we added air conditioning to a school, right? That's one of the major things we're doing as part of this referendum. So from a historical perspective, we were able to look at this project and get kind of idea costs of what's the mechanical gonna cost per square foot, plumbing per square foot, windows per square foot, right? So it's a tool. We have this for dozens and dozens of school districts. The other great part of that is, right, these are projects that we built. We know we bid them out. We can rely on that information because it was a project that was actually constructed and put in place. What do we got? Design development. So a little more advancement, right? The bigger stack of paperwork is, could be a month, could be 2, 6 months. Again, the duration depends on the project conditions and the client, but the design phase transitions from schematic design to design development. We get certainly a larger volume of a specification or project manual, and we certainly get more construction documents, more details and elevations and cut sections, and material and door schedules start to be incorporated into the project, which allows us to be more detailed in our estimate. The second, what are we talking? First bullet point, any self-perform work, we would typically do an actual quantified takeoff, right? So Cullen self-performs carpentry and masonry and steel, things that we do for a living on the self-perform side of it. We have right, really super accurate, reliable information because we perform that work. In some cases, we may reach out to trade partners. Sometimes they're contractual, sometimes they're voluntary, but it's our industry terminology, meaning we have progress drawings. We may reach out to an electrician and say, we can't guarantee you the work. It's still gonna have to be competitively bid when all the engineering is complete, but would you help support the project by giving us a budget, right? So sometimes we do that, sometimes we don't. Typically with the MEPs, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, sometimes we get some specialty conditions like auditorium. In the case of this school district in particular, we reached out to partners like Main Stage for theater improvements that are coming down the pipeline for Craig and Parker. Again, design development, not competitively bidding, and then the estimating contingency comes down in concept just because we have more knowns and less risk, so we can reduce that contingency. And then in between the process of schematic design and design development, right, we go back to that baseline budget and kind of the vertical line that was on that initial chart. We do budget comparisons. So this is, again, not intended on part of the test, but a visual representation of, we do a spreadsheet, usually a chart that compares the baseline budget to the schematic design, and then it's again done to compare to the design development. And it's a tool that helps us, it's critical to the project. It helps us identify items that may be tracking over budget or under budget, and it allows us to pivot on the design if we need to. It's also a tool that we can use to identify alternate bids. An example I can use that we are in the process of working through, at the example of Wilson Elementary, pre-referendum level, window replacements. We said, hey, we got industry or historical information on window replacements, established our budget. We started working through the design phase, and if anybody knew this and forgot to tell me, Wilson is on the historic registry, so that has an impact on the cost of construction, right? So the bullet point about pivoting our design and our scope, when we realized the historical window perspective on, particularly on Wilson, we had to pivot, generate some alternate bids. The scope of work changed. We're still fully evaluating window replacement, but it's potentially in sections or chunks of work because of the conditions of the design, the requirements. So that's a very specific example, but the budget comparison allowed us and brought that condition to the surface so we could focus on it. And then construction documents. I didn't bring construction documents, but it's a bigger stack yet. Construction documents, the Phase 1A schools, we are in the thick of that. The bid documents rolled out at the first part of October. We do have now a competitive bid phase. We just had a subcontractor pre-bid meeting here at this facility. We led attending subcontractors here and then to Wilson and then to Jefferson to look at the properties, evaluate the conditions. We reduce our contingency down to 3 to 5% and it changes from an estimating contingency now to a construction contingency. It's foolish for us as industry practitioners to go into construction on existing in buildings and not expect, right, some unforeseen conditions behind walls, above ceilings. We try to figure that stuff out and ahead of time, but we don't always get it. And again, so we have contingencies. The estimating contingency goes away at that point because we have responsible competitive bidders. Couple other things, and this is getting into the weeds of construction documents. So some tools that we use to ensure a fair bidding environment with the subcontractors. We have what are called work packages. So we take the total project budget and we break it down into a work package is a defined scope of work, perhaps that a painter will bid on, a plumber will bid on. General trades is a landing spot for things like carpentry, Division 10, things that the construction manager may also self-perform. So we have work packages, and then we also have a bid form. So the bid form is a tool that we use that there's language on here that ties. I'm going to jump a couple of slides. The bidding company acknowledges receipt of a complete copy of electronic bid documents, including but not limited to applicable plans and specifications, right? This fancy paragraph, right, legally obligates the bidders to the full set of documents. And that's what we want to do, right? We want a bid form that doesn't allow for clarifications and exclusions, right? Our intent is everybody's bidding the same scope of work within their work package. And the bid form is a tool that we use to achieve that process. A little bit into the weeds, we are asking for some alternate bids and unit prices for this project, again, as a result of our budget checks along the way. And then in an interest to increase bidding opportunities, right? There are a variety of capable and different size contractors in the Janesville market and surrounding communities, right? Smaller electricians, larger electricians. We have structured the bid form to encourage the most responsive bidders where the contractors have the option to perhaps only bid Wilson or only bid the district office here or bid all three. So if we have contractors that maybe irregardless of their size, maybe they have capacity for the summer of '26 and they can't bid all three schools, but they could bid one. So we have structured the bid form in the interest of the school district to obtain the most volume of responsible bidders that we can in an effort to, I think I've used the expression, right, stretch the dollar, right? We want to try to support and encourage our community as well as be financially thrifty with money and incentivize and stimulate that competitive bid environment. Construction schedule, just a discussion point. One thing that can impact the bid, right, is how long is the course of construction going to be? It impacts general conditions and labor. We do incorporate a construction schedule with the bid documents as well. And then the last bit I have is, right, again, just a representation, but Dan and probably Dave and Julie and myself, after the bid, we will comb through a spreadsheet of a bunch of number crunching nerds, right, looking at post-bid results. So we will share the post-bid results. We will have the apparent low bidders of, right, the respective work packages, the electricians and plumbers and drywallers. And we will, Cullen as the construction manager representing the district will make a recommendation on the low bidders. There may be conversation or it may be just a green light, but then we transition from competitive bids into subcontracts and our team gets the ball rolling with boots on the ground not too long after that process. So there was not an intention of sharing actual data, more of kind of a sausage making discussion today. I didn't pause for questions, maybe I should have, but any questions? Okay.
I don't have any questions, just a comment. I really appreciated seeing the complicated nature of this whole prospect. So I really appreciated everything you showed us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question that goes through. You mentioned you were working on the two high schools on the auditoriums, theater type of thing. Are you doing anything in the middle schools too?
There is, right on the grand scheme of the referendum, the middle schools are getting service maintenance. They're further in the process.
Further,
Right.
okay, because Edison is in terrible shape.
Yeah, well, every school had its respective amount of
Sure.
wins and losses, right? Goods and bads. Yeah, but to answer your question, yes. So Wilson, Jefferson, and here at the district office are currently bidding. Our next phase that is in the design process is Craig and Parker High Schools and Lincoln, which is kind of the twin school to Jefferson. And then we start the design process for, you're really testing my memory now, but it is going to be into the 26 and further into the 27. It's a little bit of a process, but ultimately every school in the district is getting some investment out of the referendum that passed in November. You just have to bear with us and be patient as we work through the process. Yep.
And I think we can do that.
Yeah, thank you.
But it kind of hit me because I look at the middle schools and they're all different on their auditorium, theater type of things. Marshall has done one way, but I did notice that Edison was terrible layout for a auditorium for equipment and supplies and band instruments and all that. And I'm hoping there's something that'll be put into making that a better layout. And that's just a personal thing, but from visiting the three schools, it kind of got to me a little bit in that. So I want to thank you. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
I'm good. I'm good. I gotta leave some room on the floor for Jeremy and Tori to
You go for it.
continue with the education.
All right. Assume the same rules apply. Use the mouse. No.
So Superintendent Holtzman, so the middle schools, Edison and Franklin and Marshall are in phase 3, right? So, and like, just to, and I know we give you a ton of information over the time, the months and years that we've been working on this, but an element of the auditorium, the performance space, right, is in both Edison as well as Franklin. Not so much in Marshall because you just touched on it, because there's really not much of an auditorium. It's more of a gymatorium when you open up the full doors, so.
Well, I guess it's EUA's turn at the podium here today, so we'll try to give you the architectural and engineering view of the world. As Mike said, it's been since April, but since the last time we were in front of everyone, and some things have progressed. Let's see here, go right down my screen. I'm Tori Schultz, project manager with EUA. I'm joined by Jeremy Hartbart, our senior project architect, who's spearheading the actual production work for both our internal architects and interior designers, as well as our extended family of engineering and other consultants. So he'll get up here in a few minutes and talk about some of the more design and document development processes that we've gone through, kind of give you a peek behind the curtain. But I wanted to first spend a little bit of time talking about what we've been doing so far and some of the changes that we've made as we've made way through this process. Start off with the first slide here. You may remember this from last time. We've updated it just a bit here today. Just talking about the amount of time that our team of architects and engineers have invested so far. So to get to the set of completed construction documents that Mike referenced have gone out for bid, that took about nine and a half months. That effort took 7,600 hours. That's a lot of time. Put it in a different perspective, if one person was going to do that work themselves, it'd take them 3.5 years. And we did that work in little over 9 months. So it's been a tremendous amount of time spent working in our offices, coming down to the district, walking through, climbing into tunnels and looking above ceilings and all the dark corners of the buildings, getting to this point. So there's been a lot of time spent putting these documents together for the contractors to bid. You may have recalled this slide here, which is our original production and construction schedule. And then when we first started this project, not long after the referendum passed, our intention was to work on a few buildings, for the first 6 months, get those done, set them aside, work on the next several buildings, get those buildings drawn up, and then combine those all together at the end of the year, send them off to JP Cullen to bid, and then to construct over the next year, actually next 2 years. So that sounded like a good idea at the time, and it still is a good idea, but there's been some changes in the market, right? We've seen tariffs come into play. There's been some changes with inflation and cost escalations, as I'm sure we're all aware of. And so, working through conversations with Cullen and with the district, what we've done is we've modified our approach. So now, rather than waiting until the end of the year to deliver and bid out these projects, what we're now going to transition to is do the first set of drawings, bid those out. While those are out for bid, we're working on the next group. So it becomes a much more sequential operation, draw, bid, and so on and so forth. So what that allows us to do is allows us to get out to the marketplace faster, get subcontractors under contract, get materials on order, so that when summertime comes, we're as ready as we can possibly be. We're not worried about lead time issues. We're not worried about, shutdowns at a factory or a port goes on strike. We've done everything we can to advance ourselves to the point of success as much as we can possibly do. So when summer comes, we're ready to start construction. So this is our modified approach for construction, as well as the design and documentation phase moving forward. And I think it'll be just as successful as the other strategy, if not more so. So, any questions on schedule or anything related to the order of operation? Okay.
You actually did hit on something I found of interest, because with the tariffs, and much of our raw materials don't even come from this country anymore.
That's correct.
And that they come from around the world, but very heavily from Canada.
Yes.
There, I think, more than any other country, especially lumber and.
Lumber and aluminum
Mining.
are
Yeah.
big imports from Canada. You're absolutely right. So
Yeah, so I was
trying-
wondering how you were handling it, so.
it is an ongoing challenge, and
Yeah.
Mike and his team work miracles behind the scenes to make sure that we're kept up to speed on how things are changing. And so if we need to adjust or consider a different strategy, we're trying to do that as often and as necessary as we can, without taking away from, the end result. So
We
it
may
is-
not
it's
like
tough.
it, and that's what's happening, but the thing is, rather than complaining, you've stepped up and tried to find solutions. Thank you.
Absolutely, of course. So I think with that, that kind of takes care of the dry portion of the presentation. I'm gonna turn it over to Jeremy, and he's gonna talk about all the fun things that he and the rest of the team are doing behind the scenes to create the pile of documents that Mike brought in and shared with you over there on the table. So I'll hand it over to Jeremy.
All right, thanks, Tori. My name is Jeremy Hackbart. I'm a senior project architect with EUA. My role is figuring things out, figuring the building out. How's it going to go together? Is it code compliant? All those good things. So I'm in the trenches. If my hair is a little undone, it's because I was actually on site all morning this morning on another construction site wearing a hard hat. So I like to get out on site and talk to all the contractors and figure it out. So, where am I here? Okay, so what I wanted to do is just to give a little peek kind of behind the scenes of what it is that we do, how we work towards a solution. And I can't possibly describe everything that we do here in 5-10 minutes. This is just kind of the tip of the iceberg, but every challenge that we run into, there are hundreds of challenges that we run into on a building project. Every challenge could have hundreds of decisions that need to be made and coordinated, and that can take weeks or months to do that. And a lot of it starts with information gathering, right? What type of building are we working in? What's the construction type? How old is it? Is there existing documentation that we can reference? Or if there is not, then we need to send teams into the buildings to do a lot of what we call field verification, perhaps scanning of the building, just Before we can offer solutions, we need to know first what we're working with. And in that, there are multiple parties involved, right? Tori and I are just two of the individuals on the design team, but just at EUA, who is representing the architecture of the building, there are multiple team members, but then there are also specialists, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, engineers. We talked a little bit about the auditorium work. There's a specialty auditorium consultant involved in that because that's all they do, right? As architects, we don't know the ins and outs of what it takes to put a functioning stage together. So we have to hire those people who are working for us to figure all that out. Code compliance, right? Every decision we make has to be code compliant for the safety, health, and welfare of everyone involved, and that's, mandated by the jurisdictions. So we have to consider that. Constructability, is it even possible to design what we're building, right? We need to think about that. So Mike and his team can put it together appropriately. And the domino effect of the work that we might be doing in a room where maybe we're not doing any work in the room next door. Are we influencing what's going on over there? So the next few slides will show a handful of very basic examples of some of those processes. This first example is specific to Craig High School. This is a special education department that we're designing. And the design isn't important. So and I know it's small, but the design really isn't the point of the conversation here at this point. It's more about what this slide is showing is 8 options of a possible design. And so before we come up with a final design, we need to figure out what some of the possibilities are. And so the work product that you're seeing here is a result of one of our designers on our team, who's not here, who has spent a lot of time with the user group and the principal at that school to come up with these plan layouts, and they'll sit in meetings and discuss all these needs and the options that are presented here and narrow down which is most appropriate. And after they narrow down what's most appropriate, this is that same space. Again, the design, where the doors are, isn't important for this discussion, but what it's showing is a more refined design process. So narrow down a design, and now we're going to refine that even further and start to add, dimensions to it and what type of door hardware needs to be on each of those doors and stuff like that. So every piece of the building needs to be considered and thought about and then documented. So that's what we're doing behind the scenes, which most people don't see that process, right? They only see the end result. So that's just one example. This next example, a little more technical, not as interesting probably, but this occurs at Wilson Elementary. So that building, existing building, obviously existing roof structure. As part of the mechanical design, we're putting some new mechanical units on the building, on the roof of that building. Okay, well, some of those mechanical units are very large and very heavy. Well, can that existing structure even carry that, right? So that's part of the analysis that needs to be done. And I referenced before, we oftentimes don't have existing drawings of those buildings. So like at this example here, I can't remember if we had existing drawings or not, but the structural engineer would have to know how much that unit weighs. They'll take that into consideration and analyze the existing structure that's there. In this case, they determined that the existing structure was not sufficient to carry those new units. So what this drawing is showing is, it's a technical document for the contractors, but what it's showing is the reinforcement of that roof. And before I touched on constructability, can the contractor even build that reinforcement that we're talking about? Well, in this example, we had to design new roof structure that could be brought into the building in pieces and assembled in that roof instead of one large structural member placed in there. So those are all the types of things that need to be considered. And I have one more example here. Maybe you all can relate to this one a little more. This is the bathroom facility right across the hall here at the ESC. And so one of the scopes of our work here was to renovate that toilet room facility, both the men's and women's. Now, there are great challenges in doing that. This is an old building. That existing toilet room for the men and women, they're not large enough to accommodate modern, accessible requirements, right? One of the other challenges in this room here is the entry to the women is currently at the top of a ramp. The entry to the men is at the bottom of that ramp, which means the floor levels are not aligned. They're about, if I remember, they're a foot or 16 inches apart, different, right? So, this next slide kind of shows some iteration, some options that we discussed in our office to try to fit the renovation within the existing footprint of those toilet rooms. What we quickly found is the size, because of the modern accessibility requirements and the amount of toilets, sinks that are required for a building of this size, we couldn't fit everything in that footprint there. So that offers another challenge. And this final slide here kind of shows the existing again, and then the final solution, which shows the final solution, the new entry will be off of this top level. But we've reoriented those rooms, so now what used to be different levels wants to be on the same level. So now we have to think about how we're going to infill that floor and make that work and run all the appropriate plumbing under that infilled floor. Because of how many, you'll notice there are more toilets, for example, in the women's room than there was previously. And that's because of a building code requirement. Building code requires a certain amount of toilet fixtures based on the use of the building. And so what that resulted in was a much larger footprint of what used to be there. Okay, well, where do we get that square footage from? Well, this is that domino effect that I referenced before, where now we are influencing the room immediately to the east, which used to be an office space. Well, okay, now that's not going to be large enough for an office, so where do those people get relocated to? What does that leftover space become? Stuff like that. So that's that domino effect. And that, honestly, that's just a little insight into how we approach a challenge and come up with a solution. And as I mentioned, these are just 3 examples for hundreds of challenges that are required on each project. So that's really all. Are there any questions that you had for me about that?
This is what happens when the engineer who sits on the committee does not attend, right? So there are no questions relative to the engineering aspects of the work, not to diminish the role and experience that you bring to the table. Really, before Tori concludes the EUA portion, we have two exceptional partners, both Epstein Union Architects as well as JP Cullen. I think we wanted to provide you as representatives of the board, right, a snippet in terms of the complexity of the work that the district is undertaking. I think it's also, as we talk about this, just another friendly reminder that we are doing less than 17% of the identified work, right? So a lot of it is in the ceiling, in the wall, mechanical spaces, restrooms. You know, we are not touching every aspect of the theaters at our two high schools, right? It's a portion of the needed and identified work. So just to be clear about that, this is phase one. There will need to be subsequent phases of work to accomplish all of the identified need.
Well, that's really all we had. And if there were any other questions, certainly we're happy to try to answer them.
Future work are future referendums too, aren't they?
Yes,
Or additional money somewhere we'll have to come up with.
yes,
And that, okay, so, do you know the original use of this building?
it was Black Hawk Tech. It was vocational tech school.
Vocational high school, yeah, it was back then. It's called Bogey Tech.
Bogey Tech.
Because eventually, those folks that did not acclimate to regular schools were sent here
Okay.
and that and worked on. It shows my age. And that, the same as the Cullen home is just up over the hill,
Right, right.
which I used to own.
Oh.
And I finally figured out with the paper article that it was made to be stormproof
No.
or fireproof. I couldn't figure out why all the floors were concrete, because when a bathroom went out on one floor, you should try to go through that concrete to get to repair it. And that, it took a contractor. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, where are we here? Forgive me a minute here. Gotta find my little list. I think this is, oh, let's shut these down. Bear with me. There we are. Okay, now the capital projects, is that, this is a new one, 2.3? Okay, that puts you guys in charge. And me off the thing again.
Now, green means go. Got it. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm here today to give you an update on the 10-year capital improvement plan. We've done a lot of good work over the summer, but we are not finished yet. So if I could guide you to the 10-year capital plan, just want to explain a couple of things. What you will see is a couple of highlighted dollar values in the 25-26 fiscal year. The orange represents projects that are in progress, and the blue represents projects on hold. If we have a dollar amount there that's not highlighted, that means the project has been completed. Blue represents project is on hold. You're welcome. So if you guys want to take a view of that, and if you have any questions, I can certainly answer those.
I have a question. They're on hold, but for how long?
On hold? It's a good question, thank you. So, some of the projects that are on hold were due to the fact that there was other work being done on the site. And I give you a good example, the Lincoln Elementary School, they're doing a re-roof project there, and I was unable to do some concrete work, right? So that'll be on hold until spring.
Okay, not a lack of money.
Correct. Well,
That may come down the road.
well, that may come down to it, right? So for example, if we go down to Jackson Elementary School, we look at the $125,000 for asphalt replacement. As we approach that springtime, right, it'll be a better view of what I have left in the budget. So those are projects we may still target and attack. So, yes.
Will any of the work that the city will be doing in the spring of '26 affect Jefferson Elementary School and its capital projects, and in what ways will that be affected?
Good question. I just had that notification 2 days ago. It was brought to my attention. And I know there's going to be a listening session at Jefferson Elementary that I'll be attending to get more information. You're welcome. Okay. I will be present. You're welcome. If I may, if I could direct your attention to, in the capital improvement plan, to Craig High School. I think we all know we had some issues with the chiller failure. And as you recall, we were able to rent a couple of chiller units to get us through the cooling season. Since then, we have been in the planning design phase to introduce a new cooling system. So that's been out to bid, procured. So we will be starting that work rather quickly, and the finish date will be before the 2026 cooling season begins. You're welcome. And if I may, I'd like to take an opportunity to give a shout out to Julie Yerke. She's been a wonderful addition to our facilities team. And she is up next to talk about roofing projects.
I do have one last question.
Yes.
It's okay, Julie. Go on. We were doing work on the chillers anyway at Craig, weren't we? Before? Weren't we planning on doing something, some renovation to them or updating or something?
Well,
You had money set aside for that?
No, we did not. We just had, basically, we had a major failure with that system.
Totally unexpected.
Correct.
Not-
I mean, you know what,
not
you're gonna.
early, Not early.
No, any piece of equipment we have in this district, whether it's a boiler, HVAC system, you're gonna have your quirks, and yes, they're gonna be worked on. You might have a drive that goes bad, you know, on a system that we can go ahead and replace, and system's back to normal. In this case, there was just too much going wrong with the system.
Okay, I understand. I
The
guess my
repairs
question is-
would have been about half of what it would cost to put a new system in.
And we're putting in a new system.
Yes.
Okay, so we need additional money.
I think we have that covered.
Okay, you'll touch on that in the future.
Right, so a couple things, right, and this is where we have a lot of moving parts, so you're on the correct path. Is if you looked at our long-range master facility plan, you would see eventually down the road replacements of those mechanicals at Craig and Parker High School, right? The timing is such, and again, going back to we're only addressing less than 17% of our need, right, is out scheduled. If you look back at that 10-year capital plan, is you would see mechanical upgrades at Craig and Parker High School. Keep in mind, the system that went in, and Mr. Leader will correct me if I'm wrong, went in approximately 2008. It's nearly 2026, so it's nearly a 18-year-old system. And we've had failures. So it was really to the point of this dramatic failure back in May is do we continue to invest or do we bring in new chillers? right? It's a chiller component of the system, and Mr. Leader can touch on the entire system as soon as I'm done talking, right? So when we look to that nearly 650,000 plus investment, right, is we are tapping our limited Fund 46 funds to cover that investment. And Fund 46 is not there to cover the remaining 83% of our long-range facilities planning. So one could say we are robbing Peter to pay Paul immediately, right? Because we need to provide a conditioned air environment to that building.
So we'll need to eventually backfill that money back into Fund 46. Replace it. That's to be discussed.
We have 83% of over $900 million worth of work that we need to find money somewhere. And most likely, that is going to need to be a request of our local taxpayers via referendum for that large amount over time as part of a long-range master facilities plan.
Thank you. Appreciate the sincere answer.
Hi there. Can I just say something quickly about Fund 46? If you look on the bottom of the capital planning sheet, or the last page, it does separate the funds. So for example, you're gonna see at the very, very bottom, it says Fund 46 balance. It's under the blue section. We ended last year about $8 million in Fund 46. This year, we are projected to use $2.7 million of that fund. And I believe on the previous, when we presented the complete 10-year plan, we went through the entire Fund 46 balance within about 4 years at the rate we're going. Just as an example. You know, which this also includes the chiller. So I just wanted to point out that that's not an endless supply, that will be depleted rather quickly. That's what I was getting. Yes. Okay, so I will give a quick roofing update. We still are working on both Marshall and Craig currently. Craig will actually be finished up this Friday. It's a no school day for students. And the very last section that needs to be done is the front overhang. It's sort of a rework of what was previously done, but the pitch on the roof was not adequate. So our contractor is having the subcontractor redo the roof. So that will just be a one-day project. Craig will be finished up this Friday, the 24th. And then Marshall, we're sort of midstream in Marshall right now. The last of the rock removal will happen actually tomorrow. And if you remember, the rock was off the ballasted roofs, and we had a pretty in-depth conversation last meeting, you know, on the definition of that. So that will happen tomorrow, and the estimated completion for Marshall will be November 7th. So we're getting close, and that will complete our roofing projects for this school year. So weather dependent, but so far it's been good. Then I'm also gonna give a quick update on Craig and Parker High School Ball Diamond Project. We broke ground yesterday on Monday, and I was out there, both Dave and I have been out there, met with Chris from Hutchinson that is doing most of the site work. So it is underway, projected is hopefully by the end of November that should be completed. Any questions on that?
I have a question. What exactly are they doing with the baseball diamonds at both schools?
So they are doing one baseball and one softball field at each high school. They're renovating redoing the infields, putting new fencing structures up, digging for dugout pads, cement pads, just doing a lot of basic work to get them playable again. The premise is to return the lower level teams to the high schools. They're currently, the students are getting out their last hour of class in order to transfer to gypsum facilities on the east side of town. So that is kind of the premise, is to bring them back to their home school. Yeah, you're welcome.
I don't
other
think there's any
questions?
other questions at this point.
Okay.
Nice job.
Sure.
So what you have at your desk side, and we'll allow Ann a few moments to pull it up here, is somewhat of an abbreviated, right? You're going to laugh and you go, Dan, it's over 36 slides. What do you mean it's abbreviated? But if you will see these slides again next week when we present administratively the budget to the board and ask for the adoption of that budget as well as the levy certification. So we're going to go through rather quickly. This is now a public document, so you will see the word draft on it. I want to talk a little bit about the timing of things, and the timing of things, if you will, is the DPI released its final equalization aid value on October 15th. We do, if you will, play our cards closely, and sometimes the timing does not allow for the information that you're receiving now to come out in years past. So the timing is working out relatively well for us this year. I'll go through this quickly. I'm sure everyone is looking forward to dinner, so I won't keep you here much longer, but certainly if you have a question, feel free to give me a shout out. I will also share with you that this is very high level. You're not going to see revenue and expenditures for salaries and benefits and supplies and purchase services such as transportation and utilities that you will see on Tuesday. Simply because salaries and benefits account for nearly 80% of our budget, and we're downloading that data this week. Matthew Sylvester Knutson, our Director of Finance, is pulling everything together to ensure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed for the budget packet that goes out, because it is the budget you are adopting. Once again, it seems like an eternity ago, but it was just last November that voters approved both an operating as well as capital referendum, and we're very grateful because part of our operating budget is $14.5 million that the voters supported our district in securing. As you know, we have 4 district priorities: student excellence, staff excellence, operational excellence, and community partnerships. There are a number of school finance variables. At times I do talk quickly. If you have a question, raise your hand. I know Commissioner Ardrey would say, enough of the acronyms, Dan. What exactly does full-time employee mean? FTE, full-time equivalent. All these variables come into play when it comes to developing a school district budget. Once again, budget highlights for this year is we are in year 1 of 2 of a non-recurring operational referendum valued at $14.5 million, the same value as it was in 2024-25. And the old adage is $14.5 million doesn't buy you today what it did last year. The other thing that I want to touch on, and it is probably it is a significant investment in supporting student excellence. You may recall from the staffing report is we have 10 additional support for our students with special education. That's an additional 10 staff members at the certified level. Real quick from a budget summary, as you know, the board adopts a budget parameter, if you will, and so we are obligated to provide you a balanced budget. The per pupil increase was 325 this year. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. That was planned. There's no additional revenue, either in per student categorical aid or in revenue limit authority. It's locked in at 325 for the next 397 years. State aid did not increase. Keep in mind, as you well know, state aid is not additional dollars to spend. State aid is essentially property tax relief. No new dollars in state aid. So all 421 school districts are competing, if you will, for roughly the 5.6 to 5.7 billion in state aid. Special education aid did statutorily go up to 42% in year one of the biennial budget this current year, and then 45% next year. I believe I've shared this information before. It would be disingenuous to budget for that full amount. It is a some certain value, meaning all 421 school districts are competing for those special education dollars. We're typically about 2 percentage points less than what the state statute actually requires for historically, so that's what we're planning on in the future. Long-term debt payments, you will see this. We have 2 long-term debt payments. One is about to roll off. That is actually a Fund 38 debt, although we did issue bonds for it. It did not require voter approval. Commissioner Dahmerhausen will remember the energy exemption from 2016-17 or thereabouts. That will be rolling off in 2027, and our long-term debt did go up simply because of the passage of $151.8 million in capital improvements. And then benefits and wages. Wanted to remind the committee as well as the board that nearly 1.4 million increase in district benefit costs as a result of our health insurance. You'll see the word approximate in there. I referenced earlier Matt Sylvester Knudsen works closely with Jamie Brown, works closely with Human Resources. We're extracting that data. But if we were going back to the spring, that was essentially the projected increase on dollars spending at that time. People make benefit design changes all the time, right? So that's why it's not a exact dollar amount at this point in time. And even when we lock it in, as you know, there are changes in status over time throughout the school year. And we know also approximately it's a 2.15% increase in wages. That is essentially a $2 million increase when we take into consideration all groups. So nearly $3.4 million of investment in our staff. This is just everything all together. Membership, we're going to talk a little bit about membership in just a little bit. This is Michelle Wales, the adult that you see in the picture holding the child. That is a student of ours. This is taken at Rock River Charter School. When we talk about the budget, it is this type of investment. This is a student who is completing her high school diploma, right, and should be lauded for that work. School funding, as you know, is based on members. When property values go up, the district does not receive more money. The only 2 ways a district may receive additional revenue is through members, public school students residing in the school district of Janesville, or an operating referendum. Now we have gate receipts, right? We have some revenue coming in as a result of the Janesville International Exchange Program, right? But those 2 things do not run the district. It's membership and an operating referendum. My property value went up 15% does not necessarily mean your taxes are going to go up 15%. The district's not going to get that money. It is a distribution of the equalized mill rate and levy, and we'll talk a little bit about that at the end. Membership and operating referendums are the 2 most significant revenue sources for any school district in the state of Wisconsin. I gave a shout out earlier in the meeting, right, to Rachel Monson. Rachel Monson works with our building secretaries to coordinate the Third Friday count. Dean Hartley, from an open enrollment aspect, has some input into that. We count everything. We're not going to go line by line, but essentially you'll see the number circled there, 8839. That is our FTE, full-time equivalent in terms of members. That value gets plugged into our revenue limit worksheet. Again, members drive revenue. Historically, over time, this is our membership and our enrollment. We knew we were a declining enrollment, somewhat stabilizing. You'll recall we did engage MD Roffers to conduct a community growth enrollment survey. Mark stood at this very podium, and said, whatever number I give, keep in mind it will be wrong. It's not an exact science, but it does help us understand the future. We've seen perhaps a little bit more of a dip that we would like when we look at the aggregate. We are engaging MD Roffers again. He will begin his work in November. He'll have a report to the board and administration come March. What are we seeing in the future? And this is looking at year-end open enrollment, except for the current year of 25-26. Similar to health insurance enrollment or dental insurance enrollment, resident enrollment, student enrollment fluctuates whether you're attending as a resident or whether you're attending, as an open enrolled student in. Maybe you graduated early, maybe you left school, maybe you moved. So the numbers here reflect year-end. The Department of Public Instruction provides us with a year-end reconciliation. That's what you see from 13-14 all the way through 24-25, right? So if you cross-reference numbers with what Kim Perenboom and her capable team provided you with an enrollment report, it will differ because Kim's numbers are a September snapshot. Again, the years you see until the current year are year-end snapshots. A little bit about revenue limit. Base revenue limit is an important term that you should hear throughout my presentation today and tomorrow. There's recurring and non-recurring exemptions. Again, enrollment is the belly button count. Membership is the FTE, the full-time equivalent count. Keep in mind, as an example, we have 4K. 4Ks are people, but from a calculation standpoint, they are 6/10 of an FTE. So it's one belly button, but 6/10 of a membership FTE. It's not my $100 bill. It's Mr. Holtzman's $100 bill that he gave me so I could make a photocopy of it. He's wondering if he ever had a $100 bill after I say that. When we take a look at our general operations, right, the state funds within the revenue limit approximately 63% of the district's general operations. 37% comes from local taxpayers. We are highly aided, almost 2/3, if you go back to Tommy Thompson era, right, funding 2/3 of schools. We're not quite there, we're close, but this is us. If you were to look at Gibraltar or Whitefish Bay or Beloit, all those percentages would vary. But this is us here in Janesville. The revenue limit goes back to 1993. We're not going all the way back to 1993, but you can go back to, if you will, just past Act 10, and you'll see in the 2010-11 school year, we took a hit in terms of the district's revenue limit per member. Then we've had some minor increases. We sprinkle in some per pupil aid that you see in gray. We are not keeping pace with CPI. You'll see some ups, you'll see some flats, which are essentially zeros, you'll see some increases. You will see in 23-24, and this is again outside of an operating referendum, the state of Wisconsin did increase the revenue limit floor or ceiling. It depends upon perspective. So that's why you see that large jump in 23-24. When you look at 24-25, 25-26, that is $325 per year. It would be nice if we saw more at a 45-degree angle going up, keeping pace with CPI, but it does not. This is the calculation for the revenue limit. I'm just kind of quickly blow through that. This is, and we're not going to go line by line, but a snippet of the revenue limit worksheet. So all the values that go in help us determine, right, the final levy to taxpayers, which is in the lower right-hand corner. I do want to call out, this is kind of, I think this is line 10, I'm gonna go H, 10H, right? 1.4 million, just a hair over, $1,424,482 is what we tax to support local vouchers. That number went up over $300,000 from the prior year. If you say, well, what does 1.4 million represent? It's 19% or thereabouts on the mill rate. So we are taxing 1.4 million on behalf of families who are choosing to enroll their children in voucher schools. And we're able to tax for it because it's an aid deduction for us. So the state allows us to capture that. But we're still passing on a tax increase, right, to our local community for the education of students in private schools. Equalization aid, the more property rich you are, the less aid you receive. So our property value on an equalized basis in the school district of Janesville went up just over 7%. That's okay, but you are also curious as to what, and Commissioner Dahmerhausen will appreciate this because he can get a little technical at times in terms of how much of that is new construction. Just probably under 1.5%, right? Because you want that new construction to absorb some of that tax burden, right? If property values are just going up, everyone is sharing in that, right? New construction spreads that pie out a little bit more, right? So property values go up, a portion we have to consider how much of that is new construction. We are definitely, unless you ask me to, going to go line by line on the aid worksheet, right? So the district's aid, nearly, and I'm not even going to say that dollar value. Oh, there it is. Thankfully, I put it in. $78 million in general equalization aid, right, is generated on the prior year expenses. So the 24-25 shared costs were aidable at $78 million that we received this year, again, on prior year expenses. This is just a graphical illustration. This is probably one of my favorite charts, right? Yes, I have a favorite chart. There are 3 levels of aid: primary, secondary, and tertiary. And there's a very interesting mathematical formula to where the state shares, depending your property value, in each of those values: primary, secondary, or tertiary. The bottom line is, if you were to go over here, is you would see the state kicks in 64%, right? And that's a little bit of a different number, and there's rationale for it. But in general equalization aid, right, because there are other aids, that's why the number varies from what I shared with you earlier. But in general equalization aid, we're again kind of really close to that 2/3 funding. So I'll pause for a moment. I know I'm talking fast and saying a lot, right? Is when we issue debt, and this was factored in because that is a new expenditure, right? And we are positively aided at the tertiary level. If you were to look here, as you would see then at the tertiary level, right, nearly 28% of that referendum, that debt referendum, right, this next year is going to be covered, right, by the state of Wisconsin, because we're positively aided at the tertiary level, and it is a new expenditure. Okay, mill rate. So you are getting a snippet, right? This is what we will administratively be asking the board to consider next Tuesday. The general fund levy of $43.9 million, an increase of only just under $2 million. The non-referendum debt levy, right, you'll recall, right, and Commissioner Dahmerhausen will remember, right, and this is a passion of President Murray's as well, as we paid off, right, our WRS debt. By paying that off early, when we saw that jump in the levy authority from 10,000 to 11,000, right, allowed us to capture nearly $1 million in operating revenue within the revenue limit authority. It's a shift. Do you want to pay debt, or do we want to buy groceries and pay staff? Right? By paying our debt off early with that cash influx, that allowed us in future years, this being one of them, to buy groceries, metaphorically. There's always a little bit of a property tax charge back. The referendum approved levy, you'll notice, there's a typo. It should be 24-25. My apologies. It's a good thing this is still in draft, right? It should be 24-25 in that second column from the right for you. 12.225,500. That is our debt payment because, again, we issued $151.8 million in debt. That is an increase of nearly $6.1 million. And again, that is a voter approved by 63% margin. We are levying this year within Fund 80 $200,000. That's a $25,000 increase. Keep in mind, Fund 80 is for our Bags of Hope, but predominantly for our early literacy program. We dropped it last year to $175,000 because we levied for the 25 in the prior year, but we didn't expend it. So we carried that forward, and now it's time to reinstate for those ongoing operating expenses related to the Bags of Hope. So our net change from the prior year in levy is $6.3 million. Okay, this is what everyone gets excited about, right? Is the overall levy is $58 million. When you divide that $58 million by the 7% increase in property value is now at $7.5 billion. You multiply that value times 1,000, and the mill rate is projected, right? We still have a little bit of time, right? We're 99.9% there, of $7.70, which is a 31-cent increase per thousand. Historically, this is our mill rate over time, right? You have levy and you have mill rate, and right now we're focusing on the mill rate. If you go back to 2014-15, the mill rate was $9.37. Our mill rate in 25-26 is $7.70. And you're gonna say, wow, you guys are spending less. We are spending more, property values are going up. Are you mill rate conscious or are you levy conscious? Those are two different questions. Sometimes folks will focus on the mill rate. It's a 4.19% increase in the mill rate. 31 cents per thousand. On a $100,000 home, it's a $31 increase. Again, I'll go back to the 63 to 37 margin relative to capital improvement. Right? The community was willing to invest in our facilities. Let's go back. Our operating levy is going up under $1.2 million. We have an increase in state aid of $2.5 million. That state aid, again, is property tax relief, which is lowering that general fund levy. So if someone says, oh my gosh, you're spending out of control, we are levying 1.2 million, and it's under 1.2 million more, 1.2 million more in an overall $150 million budget than we did last year on general operating expenditures. That's the importance of state equalization aid, again, property tax relief. 20% of districts, and I'm rounding, right, and I was going to put this in the slide deck, and I just realized I forgot, but I wanted to make a point of it, right, is my association, Superintendent Holtzman's association, sends out bulletins, right? Less than 20% of districts of 421 saw an increase in aid. We were one of them. So that's good for us. But again, next year, there's no new aid. That dollar value is staying the same as it did in 24-25, 25-26, and 26-27. The next biennial budget is yet to be determined. So anything that we pass on as a direct impact to taxpayers this year, right, so I would say as a district, we're doing relatively well in terms of managing the budget, accounting for things in terms that are aidable, right, and that is good for us. But again, aid is also property tax relief, but it is some certain, and all 421 school districts are competing for it. We covered this, we covered that, and any questions? That's your very quick, high-level budget.
Dan, if I could just mention that when we were promoting the referendum, we communicated to the public that they would likely see an 81 cents increase if we passed the $151 million referendum. And so, as Dan would articulately communicate to me, we did spend 81 cents. It did cost that, but our taxpayers are going to pay 31 cents. So 50 cents less, which on that 100,000 is $50 less, which I guess it doesn't necessarily matter where it comes from. If it's not coming from your pocket, that's good news. So from that actual mill rate, the message is that we promised 81 cents or less, and we actually came in at 31 cents. That doesn't happen that often, so usually we're pretty close to that number. So I think that's really a positive, and it has to do with how the state reallocated resources.
I believe that's it for that part. So what's the next part we had here? Oh. Oh, okay, this is, yeah.
So just real quick as an informational item, sorry, I'm jumping ahead of you there, Commissioner Dimerhausen, but I think I hear someone's belly, perhaps it's mine, is we know that there's been some discussion in terms of recognizing a former coach here in the district. And we're certainly very much in tune to that. I know Superintendent Holtzman and I have had a conversation. I had a conversation today with Athletic Director McLaury, right? And essentially, we'll be engaging the services of Mr. Ben McCormick to reach out to that family to get a more detailed understanding of exactly what we can do to recognize the coach. I would probably say naming a facility is most likely not in the cards. Right, but recognizing the coach, which is, I believe, that family and the coach's supporters, is most interested in how do we recognize that coach. Superintendent Holtzman isn't making that determination. I'm not making that determination, having that conversation via Ben McCormick, the Craig High School Athletic Director, and saying, okay, what can we do to recognize that coach? Like, no one's questioning the contribution. Right, I think sometimes as we get caught up in terms of we have a lot of facility needs, how do we structure that, what other types of programs are out there, making that personal contact outside of an application is of most importance, and administratively we'll be undertaking that endeavor.
There are other ways of doing things. And part of it is, if you notice when facilities and that are named, the facilities may have one name, the field may have another name, the press box may have another name. So there are ways to honor on a physical thing. And I'm hoping that's taken into consideration for someone that's done as much as he has. So keep that in mind. That's just my suggestion. And that. Are there any more? Oh, go ahead.
Well, could someone give me some examples then of, some other examples besides what you mentioned already? Like,
We can rename the school.
no. Other high schools I've been at, and Craig also has this and Parker does too, the, plaques on the wall and things like that. So, I don't know, what have you done in the past then with coaches? What has been done in the past? Because I don't know, and I'm interested in finding out.
Sure, I can respond at least. We only have one space in the district that has been named, and that's at Craig High School's basketball court. The main gym has a former coach who has, Bob Suter has his name. We have since then created some policy in regards to naming rights for fields and operations. And I think as we continue to look at potential upgrades for our facilities, we want to make sure that we're keeping the board in a space that allows us to potentially look at donors who could contribute to help support potentially upgrades to facilities. And so rather than us coming up with ideas about how we think this family might want that, what Dan's saying is we're going to reach back out and say, what do you think? What would you like to have appropriate? And it could be a recognition that both meets their interests and needs and approval of the board. So we're going to do that first, then we'll have that conversation. rather than us trying to come up with our own, well, what if you, and how about, let's make sure that they're interested in that. And assuming that that's the case, then we can say, hey, we had this conversation with the family. We're going to do this. This is what they would appreciate, and make sure that that's in alliance with our policies and procedures.
Good question. All good questions. Do we have more to comment on the agenda, other than future meetings? Where are we at there?
Do we have a finance building ground scheduled for November?
Yes, that being the third Tuesday in November would be November 18th.
Time?
3, assuming 3 continues to meet the needs of the committee members.
Yes, it does.
Yes. We'll schedule it for here. I mean, it's possible, like, I'm not sure we want to take you up to a roof in November, but I know at times we want to take some field trips, but perhaps not November. We've actually, real quick, Julie's worked with our roofing partners in terms of, as well as even someone else to do some athletic facilities in terms of using drones. I think we showed some of that. That's probably your window to that world right now, rather than, wearing appropriate footwear and scaling a ladder to the roof.
I believe Greg will be able to help us too.
Yep.
So, okay, that's all we're affected by, isn't it?